Who are your people? Last time I talked a lot about this process of becoming known, liked, and trusted, and I touched on the journey that your customers will take throughout awareness, appreciation, action, adherence, and advocacy of your brand. I want to focus a little bit more on the first step of that progression, brand awareness. Now, I mentioned before that social media is a really useful tool in building brand awareness, but before you even begin to post, you need to answer the question of who needs to be aware of you. So we'll touch a little bit on target audience and how that will apply to your social media marketing and in general, the marketing strategies that you'll place on your brand. Knowing who your ideal audience is the foundation upon which all marketing is built. Intimately knowing who you're marketing to will help to steer every decision that you make in your business to suit your target audience. Before you post, something useful to think about is how you would like to segment your market. This is going to get a little bit nerdy, and if you're into marketing, you might be familiar with these concepts, but if not, I'm going to explain it hopefully really clearly so that you don't need a background in marketing to understand what I'm talking about. When I segment markets, I think about two different personas, your buyer persona and your user persona. These two people might overlap, but I like to think of them separately because they're often different. Put simply, a buyer persona is a research-based profile that explains a target customer, the person who makes the purchasing decision for your offering. And your user persona is a profile of the archetypical person who will be closely interacting with and making use of your offering. This is a little bit abstract, so let's ground it with an example. If you're creating children's toys, your buyer is probably going to actually be a parent because I don't know how many 5-year-olds have enough money to buy their own toys. And your user is going to be that child. Perhaps it's a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old or a 15-year-old. But either way, you're going to be talking to two different groups. One of them who's going to be buying your product and one of them who's going to be using your product. This doesn't only apply to children's toys, but can even go all the way up to if you're doing business-to-business marketing. Perhaps the person who will be actually paying for your product might be the headquarters, like the person who's making the purchasing decisions could be the CEO or just somebody really high up in a company. But maybe they're purchasing software that will be used by the lower level employees. It's just good to think about these things as you start to build out these different personas. If your buyer and your user are the same person, then you're probably able to get away with just making one target customer persona. But if they're different people, or if they can be different people, I think that you should make two or more separate personas. We talk a lot more about how to make personas, and there's templates for it in the Essential Guide to Visual Branding. But in this video, I will walk you through the basics, so you should be able to do this on your own. The reason that separating out the buyer and the user persona is important is because of how it will change your messaging depending on who you're speaking to and the placement. So let's go back to the example of the children's toys, just because it's so clear and the other examples can get a little bit abstract. If you are selling those children's toys and your placement is a TV ad around the holidays where many kids are going to be adding to their wish lists and asking for gifts, then maybe you are going to structure your messaging and your visuals to be something that will resonate with the age group of your user persona. That's going to be a super different ad than if you are targeting the parent. It can be really helpful to target the user in your marketing because they will create demand for the product, which might pressure the buyer in a positive way, hopefully, to purchase your offering. On the other hand, if you're talking to the buyer, like perhaps if you have an Instagram ad going out, maybe your user is not already on social media because they're so young. And so at this point, you want to be framing your messaging in such a way that's going to resonate with the parent. Like, look at this great gift that you can give to your child. Maybe you're talking about its educational value or how the materials that you use to build the toys aren't going to harm their little ones or something like that. Those are things that might not matter so much to the user, but might matter a lot more to the buyer. Now, of course, we can get deep into this example, but I want to move on. But if anything is unclear, just leave a comment and we can talk a little bit more about it and workshop it in the comment section below. So now that we've talked a little bit about buyer and user personas, let's go back to that question of who needs to be aware of you. Well, the answer is those who will appreciate what you do. So So you can think more about this second A. Remember, we talked about moving from awareness to appreciation. Brand awareness is only as useful as the amount of people who will appreciate it. You can go completely viral on TikTok, but if it's in a group of people who will have no appreciation for what you do, like for example, TikTok has a pretty young demographic. If you're selling something that will resonate more with the elderly, that awareness, even if you get millions of views, might not be so helpful to your branding or to your marketing. So you need to create awareness in the markets that will appreciate what you do. There are some predispositions that certain age groups have. Now, of course, this is a generalization, and each human being has their own specific experiences that they bring into things, and everyone's different. But there are some common traits and behaviors that we've studied as marketers that we can come to expect from different age groups that are common enough that it's a safe bet to base your marketing around in order to resonate better with different age groups. Now, the two groups that we're going to consider and compare are boomers and zillennials. Now, for this example, I'm going to classify a boomer as anyone who's between the age of 45 and 65, and a zillennial around the age of anyone who's 18 to 30. We're filming this in 2023, and so if you're watching it a little bit later, maybe those ages have changed, but this is going to be really relevant, hopefully for the next couple of years at least. Now, boomers typically have more disposable income, and so that might mean that they are going to be a better group to target if you have a more expensive offering. However, a caveat there is that they might be a little bit less brand loyal. They are willing to move for a better price or value proposition. If you can communicate to boomers that your product is going to make their life better in some way, perhaps it has some health benefits when they're getting to that certain age where those things become really important to them, or if you are offering something at just as great a value as your competitor, but you've found a way to make it cheaper through some type of innovation, then boomers are really likely to jump ship and move to a different brand. That's excellent news for small businesses who might want to compete with more heritage brands. However, they're less likely to explore when they're satisfied. So if you have a boomer who's been buying for 20 years from the same brand and they've never done them wrong, they're really unlikely to start exploring different options. And so you have to make a really clear value proposition in order for them to move on. Things like convenience, necessity, health benefits, and flexibility are commonly valued by boomers. Now, when we look at the millennials, even though they have less disposable income, they are more likely to impulse buy. And so when we think about that disposable income, just because boomers might, on average, have more money doesn't mean necessarily that they're going to be easier to persuade to buy than somebody who's a zillennial. I'm a zillennial, so I can say flat out that even if I can't afford something, sometimes I'm going to buy it anyway because we're just more impulsive, we're young, we have things that we value sometimes more than money. And so there's something that you need to take into account there. Zillennials are often willing to pay a premium for products and services that align with their values. Now, you're less likely to sway a boomer away from a brand that they're loyal to with something like sustainability or ethics. Of course, again, that's not true of anyone. I've met boomers who are super passionate about the environment and things like that, but it's not as common as it is in zillennials. And so if you are a small business, a woman-owned business, a person of color-owned business, or you're really passionate about paying your employees what they're worth, or all your packaging is sustainable, these are things that you can highlight to a zillennial audience that might have them be more willing to pay more. We see this all the time in clothing brands. There are clothing brands that demand a higher price point for very similar products as a fast fashion brand, but people are willing to pay that higher price because it makes them feel good. It makes them feel like, you know, I'm not buying into and supporting a company that does not have the same values as me. And so those are things that you can emphasize that will be, again, more likely to sway a zillennial crowd than it might be to sway boomers. Now, something to note is that when boomers have children, they are more likely to start exhibiting zillennial behavior. So if we have a boomer with a child at home, it keeps them young, and they might start to value these things like sustainability more, probably because they're seeing their kid and thinking about the world that they would like their kid to grow up in, or maybe their child is communicating some values to them at home. And so if you're targeting boomer parents, just keep in mind that they might exhibit a little bit of younger behavior than somebody who might not have kids. These are all different things to think about, and it's very, very nuanced, which is why it's helpful to think about your psychographics. So far, we've been talking a lot about demographics just because there's such a simple way of segmenting the market. But something that I think is even more useful is looking into your psychographics. Now, demographics are things like age, gender, ethnicity, income, location, education, and employment. And this information is useful to think about with your target audience. But you can also think about some psychographic elements like personality, values, attitudes, interests, opinions, and lifestyles to get even more specific. I want to give you a quick example of how psychographics can be perhaps more useful than demographics. What do a 53-year-old CEO who's making multiple six figures and a 23-year-old college student who is essentially broke have in common, and what kind of products might they both want? How about a meal delivery kit? Even though this could be a little bit of a luxury to some college students, many would shell out for this because it's really convenient and they're super busy, and maybe they are not that well versed in cooking yet. A CEO might have similar needs and similar values like limited time, a necessity for convenience, or a desire for healthy homemade food. And even though these two individuals are in super different demographic groups, they might have some psychographic overlap. So when we look at this, we can think a little bit more about how limiting demographics can be and how psychographics can be a more useful way to segment markets sometimes. Demographics definitely have their place, and for specific products and services, there might be some really key demographic indicators which will determine which market segment you want to go for. But I would say in most cases, focusing more on psychographic elements and allowing demographics to be secondary can put you in a safer spot, allow you to avoid harmful stereotyping, and ensure that you're capturing and serving many different individuals who might belong to super different demographic groups but all have the same core desires. Now, you know how much I love examples. I feel like they just help things become more clear and keep us out of this super abstract theory world. And so I want to bring you a case study about watches. We're going to use some real life brands and study how Swatch created space for their brand in a super saturated market. Swatch came into the market at a time where there were a lot of different brands dominating. In particular, we're going to look at their competitor Rolex, just for a really good comparison. Now, Rolex fulfilled some customer needs. The watch acted as a status symbol, and they promoted themselves as a watch that will last you a lifetime. They acted as an investment piece, as the price would actually increase after the initial purchase. On the other hand, Rolex really sold themselves on being an investment, as they knew that the value would actually appreciate after that initial purpose. Now, Swatch, on the other hand, fulfilled a really different customer need. Most watch brands were placing themselves on this sliding scale between luxury and affordability. But Swatch created a whole new dimension that was meaningful and actionable. They knew that there were different brands like Rolex who already positioned themselves as super luxurious in their quality, materiality, the experience of purchasing them, but that came with a really high price point. And there were other watch brands that might have been a little bit cheaper, but maybe they made compromises on the quality, materiality, or purchasing experience. The landscape was saturated and there wasn't a ton of white space. But by creating this new dimension, they carved out a whole new section for themselves. They created watches with personality. The type of person who bought a Swatch was artistic, stylish, and they valued self-expression. Swatch sold an identity association, which is something that we see a lot in modern brands, but that was really innovated at the time where they were coming up. The CEO of Swatch even once said it's a fashion accessory that happens to sell time. Now let's break down the marketing strategies of these two different brands a little bit further. First, we can look at the product offering. Rolex offered a product, a watch, that was made of precious jewels, and it came with the certificate of authenticity. So we can see where their values are there and what their customers' values might have been. Swatches were often limited editions, they were customizable, and they really emphasized those sleek designs. On the promotional end, Rolex was thought about as being an heirloom, and so it was advertised in places like magazines, and their advertisements often emphasized exclusivity. While Swatch, they used celebrity endorsements, and they designed their ads to send audacious and bold messages. They sold the lifestyle of a Swatch wearer. Rolex was also selling a lifestyle, but it was more so buying into like this really old money aesthetic and reaffirming for the people who could afford to buy their watches that they were part of a different class, while Swatch played into a more aspirational aesthetic. These things even came down to the placement. Rolexes were sold in high-end locations and jewelry stores, while Swatches were sold in places like malls and other high traffic locations. These encouraged impulse buys, and the price point was a lot more accessible, so people could do that. And the store design was intentionally disruptive. It was accessible and vibrant, and it invited shoppers to touch the watches and try the products on, which was such a contrast from Rolex and other brands that were encasing their watches in a glass box, and you would not even be allowed to touch them unless you asked a salesperson who was interested enough in you as a buyer that they would bring out the watch and let you try it on. There was also strategy in the pricing. Rolexes were really expensive, and Swatches were a lot more affordable at that time. Swatch priced on whole numbers, which is something we're going to come back to a little bit later, but this was a strategy that kind of declared the innate value of the watch. They weren't trying to introduce any types of trickery like ending and 99 cents. Often their watches for the first few years of running their business were exactly $100. Now, though Swatch really rose to success through finding its own specific niche, eventually they're able to branch out. If you look at Swatch today, they have an array of different types of watches, from things that look maybe more similar to what Rolex would have sold, all the way to the super sleek designs and bright colors and funkiness that they became well known for. But in the beginning, when they were an emerging business, they made sure that they were super intentional about who they were targeting and what customer needs they were serving. They niched and they owned that market. When I think about this idea of niching, I always think about it as digging deep instead of wide. If you are one person with 8 hours in the day and one shovel, how deep can you dig if you're going to cover a smaller surface area versus if you're the same person with the same amount of hours in a day and somebody tells you to cover a wide surface area? Of course, the narrower you go, the deeper you can dig. The wider you go, you're gonna be more shallow. However, as you gain more resources, more shovels, a better digging machine, more people to help you, you can cover a wider surface area and go just as deep. That's the same way as I think about running a business. When you're at the beginning, you're probably a solopreneur or just have a teeny tiny team. So go narrow, niche down, go really deep, focus on one type of need that you are fulfilling for people. Focus on a really specific psychographic group and speak to those people, own that market, build that authority, and then as you gain more resources, you can start to branch out. So to close this case study, Swatch used a psychographic market segmentation and crafted their promotional efforts to serve their defined target audience. Now I know I started this lecture talking about social media, and we are going to get back to that, but I wanted to emphasize how important it is to segment your market correctly before you start to post, because if you are speaking to everybody, you're speaking to no one. It's not useful to just put things out there on social media and not know who you are creating content for. If you can get this foundational stuff in line, your efforts are going to be that much more effective. Now, anytime I talk about niching, especially to creatives, I often have people talking about, well, you know, there's so many things I'm passionate about. I'm a multi-hyphenate. There's tons of different people who would benefit from what I do. And even if you're not a creative, when I talk about niching audiences, most small business owners will think, well, if I focus in, then I'm probably going to make less sales, because as I am now, even as I have this huge broad target audience, no one's buying from me. And if the shovel analogy didn't work for you, I hope that this illustration helps to persuade you over to my side of niching being useful. If you think about having a target on a wall and you have a paintball that you throw at and you hit a bullseye, what's gonna happen? You'll hit the bullseye, you'll hit the target, and there's also going to be a splatter. That's the same way that it's going to feel when you target a really specific buyer or user. If you have a super specific person in mind, you have decided around what age they are, where they live, where they spend their time, what they're passionate about, what their hopes, fears, dreams are, exactly the way that you serve them. No matter how specific you get, there's always going to be a splatter. There's always going to be people who are similar to this specific user or buyer that you've identified who are going to also be attracted to your marketing. So never get too worried about being too specific. It's really not possible. I myself have a really specific type of client that I typically work with and that I frame my marketing towards. But if you actually look at my client list, they're diverse. I have people of all sorts of ages and ethnicities who come and work with me, people who are at different stages in business and career, and they all were attracted to my agency in some different type of way. Just because I'm specific about who I market to doesn't mean that there's not other people who I'm able to halo in. There are so many social media platforms to choose from, and it can actually feel overwhelming to know which one to focus on. This landscape is ever changing, but I'm going to give you my best advice here in 2023 on which ones favor organic growth the most and which ones might be right for your business. Now, a bit of a spoiler, the answer is going to be different for everyone. There's no one social media platform that is perfect across the board, but I will hopefully give you all the frameworks that you can use to decide for your personal business, for your personal target audience, and your personal ambitions, what's going to work best for you. And again, I'm going to be focusing on organic growth. If we start to bring in the question of advertisements, my answers will change completely. But I'm guessing that most of the people watching this video are wanting to find affordable ways to grow brand awareness. Yes, we can all throw $500,000 at ads and a lot of eyes are going to come on our brand. But what happens if you don't have that type of initial capital? Or even if you do, maybe you want to figure out what works for you organically so that when you put money behind it, you're just improving your results rather than gambling your money away on ads and strategy and content that might just not be working. So before we get into the platforms, I'm going to give one piece of advice. I recommend going deep on one social media platform before expanding out. Most of the content creators and businesses that you see that are omnipresent across all platforms have a team. And even with that team, it's quite challenging to upload quality content consistently to several different social media platforms. There's tricks and strategies that can help you do so, like repurposing, but when it comes down to it, even, taking a YouTube video and turning it to shorts and using the audio as a podcast, those tips that you hear often, they all take time. Even though it will take less time than creating native content for each platform, it still is going to take at least an hour or two to format each piece of content for each social media platform. And so my recommendation to anyone who is a solopreneur or has a smaller team is to just go deep on one social media platform, master it, grow your awareness there, build authority there, build a following there, figure it out, and get yourself into a system, a process of posting that works for you so it feels easy. Once you get comfortable with that and you feel like you have extra time, then you can start to add on and layer on more social media platforms. Hopefully the one or two that you focused on initially will be generating enough revenue for you, either through client acquisitions or product sales, or maybe you're even making money on those platforms, since so many you're able to monetize nowadays, that you can perhaps hire on an assistant or a team that will help you to grow on other platforms. Now, all of those disclaimers aside, let's go into each social media platform that's prevalent on our landscape here in 2023 and talk about the pros and cons of each of them so you can make a decision on what's right for your business. The first one I'm going to go over should be no surprise. It's TikTok. TikTok is absolutely dominating the social media landscape these days, and for good reason. There is explosive awareness potential on this platform. You can go viral quite easily. It's getting a little bit harder than it was maybe a couple of years ago, but still, of all the social media platforms, the one that you're most likely to go viral on is TikTok because of that really interesting algorithm that they have. Their user base is still growing, and currently it's one of the most popular platforms. So that's really good news, because if you grow on TikTok, you know that they haven't reached their peak yet. And so there might just still be a ways to go, like a few more years to go before they start to plateau and dip, as social media platforms often inevitably do. Some of the challenges with TikTok, however, are that they have a younger demographic. So depending on what your business model is and the type of people that you might want to speak to, that's something to consider. How useful is it to go viral if it's amongst a whole bunch of 16-year-olds and perhaps you offer services that cost $10,000? You know, it might not be as useful for you, but on the other hand, if you sell a makeup product or jewelry or something that might be affordable to that age group, it could be really helpful for you to gain a bunch of awareness on that platform. So that's why I think it's super important to make sure those fundamentals are in place, where you know exactly who you're talking to and why before you even start to think about posting on social media. It's going to help steer a lot of these decisions. Another challenge that's there with TikTok is that you often have to attention grab in some juvenile ways. This might work for your brand if you have something that's a little bit more light or youthful, but if you have a business that it's essential that you're really respected and people trust you, and maybe you just have a more serious brand, the type of content that would do well on TikTok might actually hurt your brand associations. It may not be worth it to do meme type videos or dances or things that are silly, even if that's what's doing well on that platform, if it means that people are going to have a skewed perception of your brand. So you have to weigh and balance those pros and cons and think about if it's worth it to put in place a TikTok strategy, if it makes sense for your personality, and if it makes sense for your brand. The next platform that I want to talk about is YouTube. YouTube is such a stable platform that has continued to grow and thrive over the years. It's one of the longest standing platforms, and it's joined forces with Google, so it's great for SEO. The content is evergreen, meaning that whether you uploaded a video 1 hour ago or 1 year ago or even 5 years ago, people might still be discovering it. This is great news for anybody who puts a lot of time and effort into their content. Just because something didn't get picked up by the algorithm right away doesn't mean that that video is dead. It can still come up later. If you create videos with really good titles and on topics that people are searching for, in particular your audience, your target audience is searching for, then you will always have that opportunity to go viral and build that awareness. Something else that's beneficial about YouTube is because it's predominantly made out of long form video content, although things like shorts are coming up now. It fosters a tight-knit community. It's easier to become really engaged in and committed to following a creator's journey when you're watching a 20-minute video where they're talking to you, or a vlog where they're sharing their life with you, than from a 10-second clip that you might find on somewhere like TikTok. So that's really awesome if you have a business that most of your customers need to be fostered through a journey rather than something that depends on impulse buys or quicker conversions. Now, some of the challenges of YouTube is that it is time consuming and it can be slow to grow that initial audience. If you don't already have some subscribers baked in, it might be a really long time, months or even years, before people start to watch your videos. But once that ball starts rolling, it really rolls, and it can be so transformative for your business. The next platform that I want to talk about is Twitter. Twitter is really trend oriented, and there's opportunity for organic reach. However, some of the challenges are that it's not exactly an image-focused platform, which for some of you, that might not matter. But for a lot of people, showing images of people interacting with their products or showing photos for creatives of the types of work that they make is really essential for their business. Users are also statistically less likely to purchase than on other social media platforms. Another thing about Twitter is that it's quite controversial and highly politicized. This may land in the pros or cons category depending on your business model. If you create an offering that's justice oriented or ethics oriented or super political, then maybe Twitter is actually the perfect place for you to be so that you can engage in those types of conversations. But if that's not really your style, that doesn't match up with your offering, that may be more problematic than anything. You're most likely to get canceled on somewhere like Twitter. And so if you are not as educated in politics and things like that, and you're putting yourself out there on a platform like that, you just need to be prepared for the potential of that type of response from people. The next platform I want to talk about is LinkedIn. LinkedIn is rich with networking opportunities. It's created by and for professionals. There are a few other social media platforms that CEOs might scroll on, but LinkedIn is full of people who are high up in the corporate ladder. This can be really beneficial if you need to reach those people, as you can curate your profile in such a way that your posts are getting liked and shared, and so they're landing on the feeds and pages of a really diverse group of individuals. Something I really like about LinkedIn is that when anybody engages with your post, it automatically shares that post to their network. On other social media platforms, you have to be pretty intentional about hitting the share button. But on LinkedIn, somebody could so much as like your post or comment on your post, and LinkedIn will show that post to their entire network's feeds and say, Tosin liked this person's post. That's a pretty awesome opportunity for growth. LinkedIn's also not an image-focused platform, and so if that's really important for your business, it's something to consider. And it's uncommon for people to share day-to-day content, making consistency a challenge. Often on LinkedIn, you have to be giving a hot take about something or have a really inspiring story to grow on that platform. For those of us who are just living life day to day and want something a little bit easier where we can just show what we're up to, show a little bit of the behind the scenes of our business, LinkedIn can be a little bit more challenging for that. But if you are able to create a LinkedIn strategy, and if you are going for the type of demographics and psychographics who spend a lot of time on that platform, I think it's well worth it. The next platform that I want to touch on is Instagram. Instagram is super image focused and becoming video focused as well, which is an opportunity for being able to get people to really engage with your offering in a tangible way. Instagram is a huge social media platform, so it has users in a wide variety of market segments, and shopping is integrated right onto the platform. So if you're selling a product and you have a really convincing post that sells a lifestyle really well to the point that somebody wants to instantly buy, oftentimes you can tag your products and people can just tap on the image and go through and check out right there on the spot. It's really interactive, which fosters community. You can ask questions in your captions and start a conversation in your comment section. You can add stickers and polls on your stories and just really create this engaged community. I really love Instagram for that. There's few other social media platforms where you can have conversations with people you've never met in person in the DMs, and it's so normalized. One of the biggest challenges with Instagram is of this current moment. Organic growth is really challenging. There was a time where you could just post a really good image and get on the explore page and get seen by hundreds, thousands, or millions of people from there, but that kind of started to decrease. There was also a time when Reels were just first introduced where you could post a 7-second video and go super viral. It's getting harder and harder, I think just because of the saturation of the platform and algorithmic changes, to get seen on Instagram. And even if you already have a baked-in following from before, those followers are not guaranteed to see your posts. That's a big challenge of the platform, and I think that if you're just starting out, it's worth considering whether Instagram is the right platform for you, just because as of right now, at the beginning of 2023, as I talk about this, organic growth is very challenging on Instagram. I am seeing some success for people in posting reels and carousels, and so there's still an option there, especially if you have super value dense content where you educate people in a certain way, but it can be a little bit challenging just to post a beautiful photo and have it be seen by your followers or people outside of your follower base. And the last social media platform that I'm going to talk about, and I'll just put a side note in here. Not all of these are fully considered social media, but I'll put them all in the same bucket, is Pinterest. Pinterest is just like YouTube, a really stable platform. It's beneficial for SEO, and the content from there is also evergreen. I've found Pinterest to be invaluable for my business because it reaches a lot of people and it's helped to raise us up where we are in Google. When I say that something is beneficial for SEO, that's mostly what I mean. Just that when people search up your name or search up certain things related to your business on Google, how high do you come up? The higher you come up, the better your SEO is. That's oversimplifying a little bit, but that's a different lesson for a different day. Pinterest is awesome because it's really easy to repurpose content for more reach. You can have a whole Pinterest strategy just based off of pinning content from other social media platforms. You can take your Instagram posts, your YouTube videos, your blog posts from your websites and just throw them all on Pinterest, and it'll probably do pretty well. It's a little bit slower to get started, and so that initial build, you're not going to see a lot of sales, but after a few months to a year, you're probably going to start to reach large amounts of people as the content gets sorted and sent out to the right people who are interested in it. Because of the way that Pinterest is, there's a really big opportunity for virality. Once one of your pins gets picked up by the algorithm, it can go really far and wide and for a very long time. Pinterest is also seasonal, meaning that if you have a pin that's specific to the winter, for example, it could go viral one year and then it could die down, but then the next year again, it could get picked up by the algorithm. So that evergreen content can be really useful for your brand. I also like Pinterest because it has these outbound links. If people click on your pins, they'll be sent out to wherever you want them to go, which could be your website or the link to join an email list. I end on this because I think that this should be the main goal always. No matter which social media platform you're on, I really don't recommend basing your entire business strategy around that social media platform, even if you're a content creator. I think diversifying where people can find you is really important. So the moment that you have enough resources, I think you should join other social media platforms, and most importantly, bring people onto an email list or your website or somewhere that you control. In the end, when we sign up for all of these social media platforms, we enter a contract with these private companies that they can delete our profile at any time. In the end, they own it. They may even own the content that's on it. And so if your Instagram page or your Pinterest disappears one day, I don't want that to crumble your entire business. So using social media as a brand awareness tool, but making sure you're bringing people onto an email list or directing people to your website so that if you disappear off of the platform one day, they still come back and look for you is so essential. And when it really comes down to it, the key to succeeding on any social media platform is just posting really great content and being consistent. I'm going to leave you with this quote by Jonah Berger from his book Contagious, Why Things Catch On. I think this is a really excellent read for anybody who's a business owner. It's not specifically about social media, but the lessons in it will apply to your social media marketing and marketing outside it. Berger says, people don't think in terms of information. They think in terms of narratives. But while people focus on the story itself, information comes along for the ride. Though chasing virality is not always useful and it can be a futile and even harmful exercise for your brand, creating content that is designed to be share-worthy is that intersection that you want to live in. Consumers need to know about something before they can buy it. That's that awareness piece. So wanting to have your content seen is certainly not a bad thing. But if someone knows about something and then is repulsed by it, that will help. Word of mouth is the primary factor behind 20 to 50% of all purchasing decisions. It is more persuasive because it is more trustworthy. So with that in mind, creating social media content that is shareable, that will get people talking and sending these videos and images and text posts to their friends is one of the more effective ways of marketing. And it'll probably work better when you're looking at conversions than just targeting people with ads. Consistency is so essential, not only because it will help the way that the algorithms see you, but because it keeps you top of mind. This is important to create bookings or to make sales, because when you are accessible through people's thoughts, it will lead to action. We need to create ideas that are frequently triggered by the environment and create new triggers by linking our products and ideas to prevalent cues in that environment. Top of mind leads to tip of tongue. When we care about something, we share it. The more our posts can evoke energizing emotions like excitement or anger, the more people are likely to take action, which may mean engaging with your posts, boosting them in the algorithm, or even reaching out to you. Now, Berger talks a lot more about these concepts in his book, so I would really recommend going to read or listen to it. It's a really good one. But those are kind of some of the key elements that are important to think about when you're deciding on your social media marketing. So remember, use these platforms for awareness, and then get people over into a community that you have a little bit more ownership and control over. And choose a platform that's going to be right for your organic growth, that your audience likes to scroll on. Go where your people are, and create beautiful content that is authentic to you and your brand. It makes people feel the way you would like them to when they interact with your products and services. If you're just as captivated by these topics as I am, then you can look into our Essential Guide to Visual Branding. It's an ebook and toolkit that walks you through in detail the entire branding purpose and embeds these theories of marketing, behavior economics, and psychology that inform visual design. Our goal is to ensure that all of your visuals are not only beautiful, but strategically rooted. Now, if you're following along with the Essential Guide to Visual Branding, now would be a good time to read Chapter 2, Visual Research. We're going to talk a little bit in that chapter about how to curate a visual vibe, which is essential for a lot of social media platforms since most of them are image and video based. You are going to learn how to audit different brands and figure out what kind of emotions different types of imagery and colors and fonts and even lines evoke. If you have any questions, comment below. Let's have a conversation.